Hey friend, and welcome to this replay with Minjun Chen, who is a product designer at Spotify, ex Microsoft. In this live stream, Minjun and I touch on the important skill of storytelling and how storytelling can be leveraged within your design career, whether it be during interviewing or in your day-to-day work with cross-functional partners. Minjun is currently a product designer at Spotify and she used to work at Microsoft. This video is sponsored by Superpower and I'm so happy to have Superpower as a sponsor. They power my community platform, which is where you can see live streams like this live as well as find a mentoring session with me. Superpower is a great way to connect with your mentors and you can find me on Superpower at superpower.com/femke. Enjoy the stream. Welcome to today's stream. It's been a little while. I hope you have all been having a really great summer wherever you are, or winter, I guess, if you are in the Southern Hemisphere. And today I'm very excited to have special guest Minjun Chen from Microsoft. Minjun has been designing end-to-end search experiences for Bing. Before joining Microsoft, she worked at Amazon and Wayfair, working on a variety of B2B and B2C products from membership, subscription to supply chain and hardware. And outside of work, sounds like she also enjoys good coffee and Pilates. We were just talking about Pilates before we came on the stream, actually. You were telling me about it. But yeah, Minjun, welcome to the stream. It's so nice to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful intro, and I'm super excited about today's topic around storytelling.
Yes, me too. Maybe before we get into it, do you mind sharing a little bit around your background and your sort of journey into design? How did you end up as a designer at Microsoft? What was that story like for you?
Oh yeah, that's a wonderful question. It's a long story. So when I was in the high school in China, I got my first Apple product, which is the Apple Touch. So it's going back like long time ago, like 10 years ago. And during that time, one of my friend who studied abroad and come back to China and told me that Minjun, there's a major called Human Computer Interaction Design. So basically, students who graduate from this ACI program, they successfully land a job like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. So I didn't know ACI, like what is exactly student study at ACI program, but because I always want to become a designer, maybe in a UX designer in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping always having this kind of like goal or dream in my mind. So I went through like different school and studying different major. So I studied Chinese literature and language at college.
Wow.
But yeah, so it's a completely different major than the UX because there's no UX major in China at that time.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was thinking that I need to hone my design skill set, maybe the graphic design or visual design. So I start to do some internship in this local magazine and newspaper where I can learn Photoshop, like InDesign, this traditional design tool on my own, and apply it to my graphic design work at this magazine and this newspaper. So after that, I start to applying for the school in the UX. And firstly, I got my master. So first of all, I got my master degree at University of Pennsylvania. So I studying learning science and technology. So it looks like a different major than the UX design, but I still want to become a UX designer. So what I did was during my time at UPenn, I took as many as design class as my elective. So I took like graphic design, industrial design, information information design. So I took basically different design class so I can build up my portfolio in order to apply for this HCI school in the state. So luckily, I applied for the HCI school and I got a few of the admission. And finally, I went to my dream school, which is University of Washington Human Computer Interaction Design.
Wow.
So I was just so excited because finally, after like couple years, like efforts and time and a lot of tears coming through along the way.
Hard work, yeah.
And I finally like went to UW and studying HCI. So I work with student there and start to learn like UX design masters and all these different things from the UX design. And after graduation from the school, I landed a job as a full-time designer. And when I progress in my design career, there's also a lot of things happening, such as like being laid off by my first company. So I have to
Oh,
find
that's
a job.
hard.
It's so
Yeah.
hard, especially for the junior designer at that time. It's just basically you didn't have enough experience to find the second job, because I basically only have one project from my first company I can talk about to find another job. But luckily, I landed a job at Wayfair, and I was working on the warehousing team. And
Mhm.
because of the domain is so special, so I got a lot of opportunity to fly to the Wayfair warehouse, so I can do the user interview and the usability testing with our warehouse user, warehouse associate, and supervisor. So because of my experience at Wayfair warehousing space, so I was able to build a variety of the portfolio, from the
Yeah.
mobile scanner device to the web dashboard. So I successfully landed a job in bigger company like Amazon. So during my time at Amazon, I was able to work at the Prime. Basically, I'm working on the consumer facing of the Prime experience, where I'm designing these different customer journey to help our Prime member understand what is Prime benefit and what kind of benefit they can engage and use under their Prime membership.
Right.
So after staying at Amazon for a while, I moved to Microsoft. So currently, I am the designer on the Microsoft Bing. So basically, I'm working on the enterprise search for Bing right now. So if
Mm.
you are using the Bing and search anything on Bing, and under the work vertical, this is something my team is responsible.
Wow,
So
I mean, that is
yeah,
such a career journey to go from like Chinese literature all the way to working
yeah.
at places like Amazon and Microsoft. I think a lot of people can probably relate to your story around like not having enough work in the portfolio to get that next step in their career. It's like a really common challenge I hear of like, in
Mm.
order to get the job, you need experience, but to get experience, you need the job. So it's this like
Yeah,
endless cycle.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get into a little bit around storytelling, which I know is today's topic. Before I do, just for folks tuning in, if you have any questions throughout the stream, feel free to pop it in the chat on the right hand side. There is a tab for questions, and you can upvote questions from others. And so we'll make sure we get to any questions at the end. But let's get into storytelling. Maybe like you just told us this amazing story about your career and how you got to where you are today. Can you share a bit about the role that storytelling has played in that journey
Mhm.
for you? Like where in that story
Yeah.
has storytelling been an important skill
Mhm.
for you to have?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think storytelling plays a very important roles in my design journey. So first of all, I need to leverage the storytelling skill to write the personal statement in order to apply for the school. So
Mm,
basically, I need to talk about, even I study in different major, and none of them is related to UX design or product design, but I need to highlight how my peers experience, I learned, and what kind of skill set I gain from my peer experience can take into the UX design, and why I'm driven by solving the human problems through the design. So I need to use a lot of real world example in the story from my past experience to craft the story for my personal statement, and then I can like get into this ACI school. And the second part is, when I was doing the job searching, storytelling is way more important than I was thinking before.
yeah.
Because during a behavior question, definitely you need to talk about, use the real world story to talk about like how you handle the conflict with the PM engineer, and how like what kind of challenge you have at your work, and how did you solve this challenge, as well as for the portfolio presentation. Like it's all about the storytelling, no matter like what kind of project, like enterprise design project or consumer facing project, you always need to like have a story. And during this kind of presentation, you always need to showcase your storytelling skill as well as presentation skill,
Mm-hmm.
because we are not just the designer who are pushing the pixel, but having this kind of strong storytelling and presentation skill is the key to get more alignment and communicate your design with cross-functional partner. And so this going back to the last point about the storytelling, like if especially if you are working in a product that have higher impact on maybe billion or million of user. So any kind of small design change, you need to get alignment with not just from your design team, but also from the cross-functional team like PM, engineer. And sometimes if this project you have to work with, if this is the project, like you might need to work with the cross-functional team or designer outside your own team, which means you also need to lead this kind of design review and present your design work with like senior business and design leadership. So it's a lot of like presentations, like using the story you craft for the feature you are designing. So that is reason I find like this is areas I have to grow and put more effort and
Yeah.
make it better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like when you get into the design industry, I feel this kind of expectation that, oh, now I'm going to spend like 90% of my time in Figma or whatever, like
Mhm.
creating designs. And that's kind of like the only thing you focus on, I feel, especially early on in your career. But then you quickly realize that so much of it is the cross functional collaboration and team alignment, having strong design rationale, convincing stakeholders of the decisions that you've made, presenting your work for feedback. Like a lot of that stuff makes up the role of a designer. And I think that can
Mhm.
be quite a shock for a lot of designers entering the industry who just want to, like, be left alone and like do their work and push the pixels. Um, and I guess for you, like, how did you discover that this was an important skill worth investing in? Like, were you getting feedback about your storytelling
Mhm.
skills, or were you kind of realizing on your own, like, hey, this is maybe something I should improve upon? Or what was it for
Mhm.
you that kind of made you start investing in building this skill?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, it's definitely I start to realize the importance of storytelling for the rejection I got when I start my
Ah,
job interview. Yeah,
right.
because a lot of time when I presenting my very early like portfolio presentation to this hiring manager, I also feel very boring because I basically walk through a human-centered design process and I talk
Yeah.
about like what I did. I drew this like journey map and then I create a persona, something like that.
Mhm.
So I feel like it seems very boring to walk through my portfolio in this way. And then I start to like searching online and how like other designer and folks talk about the storytelling during the portfolio presentation. So this
Mhm.
is one way I realized the importance of storytelling. And the second one is definitely like through my in my daily work, because I always get some early on. I always get some feedback or some suggestion advice from my design manager about like what I should say or what I shouldn't say during the
Right.
design review, especially with the PM or engineer. So I always get this kind of feedback. And I also knew that early on I was so anxious and nervous about tell a story or presenting my
Mhm.
design work with this cross-functional team. So I set this storytelling is one of the critical areas or opportunity areas I really need to uh, like grow. Like you really need to spend more time and improve it. And the last thing is, it's also coming from the interview. So overall, like if you are looking for an IC designer role, there's a clear like rubric.
Right.
Criteria they are looking for, especially for this larger company, people they are looking for the well-rounded designer, which means you are not just good at hard skill, but also you need to good at soft skill like
Yeah.
presentation, storytelling, communication, collaboration. So I think like if I want to grow my career in the future and then the job like at Microsoft or Amazon, I have to like overcome these opportunity areas, I have to improve my storytelling skill during my work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very like mature, I feel, and like self-aware of
Mm,
you to realize like
mhm,
this is a gap I have, or this is, you know, to be
mhm,
able to see that this is going to be a really valuable skill that I need to build. Um, and I guess like how has it been for you since you've built or been working on this skill? Like, do you feel like you're able to have more effective conversations with your collaborators? Are you able to like more quickly work through the
mhm,
design process? Like, what are some of the benefits or positive
mhm.
things you've found have come out of you know, gaining this skill?
Yeah. So I can speak about like multiple things. So first of all, it's definitely, I think I can build up a better collaboration um, algorithms with my
Mm,
cross-functional team as well as my design team, because when you're presenting your design work with these different people in your company, the storytelling strategy might be slightly different. Because if you're presenting your design work for feedback, for design critique with your design team, sometimes you have to introduce the project background a little bit, because
yeah.
not all designer they are working directly with you on this project. So you have to talk about like what's the user problem you're trying to solve, what kind of feedback you are looking for. So just introduce a little bit background so they can give you the feedback on the design work. However, if you talk about or present your design work with like PM engineer, because they are working closely along the way for this
Right.
project, so you don't have to like mention about like maybe user problem or like any project background like for each of the design review. However, what you need to say is about like what kind of feedback I received from the PM engineer last week. So based on their feedback, how did I adjust this feedback for my
Mm,
latest design? And what is my design proposal with the rationale? And I basically need to uh, talk about my design proposal recommendation based on some rationale I gather from either the user research or some qualitative and quantitative data. So yeah, and I think the purpose of communicating with the cross-functional team through my design work is more likely to get alignment and receive the feedback from the team to make sure
yeah.
that we all align with like every design decision and design update. So yeah, so this is from the work environment perspective. And the second is more about like the interview, like job interview
Mm,
perspective. Storytelling is a huge help for me to land my job in this multiple company, because the way how you showcase yourself, the story you bring into the portfolio presentation or your behavioral question can showcase you multiple like product design skill, including the hard skill and soft skill, as well as the superpower I have. So, for
mm,
example, like during my portfolio presentation, usually for the first project, I will be talking about the end-to-end product design, larger scope project, so I can showcase a variety of the product design skill set, including research, interaction design, like collaboration and communication, dealing with the conflict. However, like I also will start to think about what kind of specific superpower I have in my first project and second project. So basically, through the two projects I have been showcased during my portfolio presentation, I can show I'm a well-rounded designer with maybe
right.
two superpower. Maybe it's a mobile prototyping, or maybe it's a like micro interaction design. So I can showcase like like a package of my skill
Yeah.
sets during the story I'm showcased during the portfolio presentation. So this is the second thing. And the last thing is, after I've been more comfortable with the storytelling, I also find that there's a lot of designer they are still struggling with the storytelling. So I start to share my storytelling like framework or some advice to how to enhance your storytelling
Mm-hmm.
to many more designers. So I attend a few of the design online design events as speaker, and also join this kind of live streaming platform to share my experience as a designer to enhance the storytelling skill. Yeah,
Yeah.
because because English is not my native language, so mastering this kind of storytelling skill set is a huge like benefit to my career and my personal
Totally.
growth. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so lucky to have you joining us and sharing this with us. So I know you mentioned towards the end a little bit about your framework for storytelling. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
we can dive into that on like
Mm-hmm.
what do you think are the principles of good storytelling? Is there a specific structure? Like, what is the overall framework that you
Yeah.
use when it comes to telling a story?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a great question. So here is a multiple like principle I always have in my mind when I start to think about the story. So one principle is knowing about your audience, because the story might be changed even you are working on the same project, but how you can tell the story will be changing all over the time based on this different audience. For instance, for the hiring manager, they are more looking for the skill set you showcase from the story. However, for the cross-functional team, your product manager, engineer, they are more likely want to know about how do you balance like user needs, business constraint, and technical constraint, this kind of thing from your design work. So this is the first principle, knowing about your audience, so you can slightly change your story based on different audience. And the second principle is about um, three is a magical number. This is something I've learned from some storytelling like books and video, because people will become very overwhelming if you are showing more than like three item or three story during your portfolio presentation or during any of your presentation. So always do so based on this principle, I always using three story with three challenge to talk about my portfolio presentation for each of my project. And I also leverage this three is a magical number story to make my sentence more concise whenever I start to introduce the project background to any of the audience. Because sometimes we introduce so many detail to walk through this project, but some of these things is not necessary for the audience to know in order to give you the feedback. I also using the three is the magical number when I presenting my design proposal with my cross-functional team. So basically, I might have like three design that puts on my Figma file on the front. However, I will be walking through the my preference, my suggestions at the very beginning, and then I will
Right.
save these two design proposal later until
Yeah.
they ask me any question. Because even though like sometimes as a designer we explore maybe like 5 or 10 direction, but it's not necessary for us to walk through everything with the PM team. As a designer, we need to have like design voice and showcase which is our recommendation based
Yes.
on all these kind of different like strengths and user insight.
Totally. I think that's a really important skill for designers to build upon is having conviction
Mhm.
in their work. And
Mhm.
too often I see designers presenting like all of their explorations back to a PM. And I think part of our role is to
Mhm.
take all those explorations and come up with a recommendation or a proposal for how to move
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And I like that you have like the one sort of recommendation
Mhm.
and then maybe a couple
Mhm.
sort of in your
Mhm.
back pocket.
Yeah. And
Go
the
ahead.
other of the storytelling principle, and the third one is like because we are humans and human love the story, especially the story with conflict
Yeah.
and challenge. I think this principle is very, very helpful for you design interview or your portfolio presentation. So early on, I mentioned that I just basically walk through the entire process. However, if I changing using this framework into my portfolio patient, not I'm not I no longer just told the manager that I did something. However, I will say what kind of challenge I had and how I overcome the challenge through different like prototype or artifact I create or any action I did during
Yeah.
the process to help my team move forward with this process. And knowing about this principle, it will become much more easier for you to prepare some stories in on your pockets for any of the one-on-one behavioral question, because all these kind of behavioral question, they love to ask you a question about how did you handle the conflict with your PM, engineer, your manager,
Yeah.
like what if like you had a disagreement with someone on your team,
Yeah.
what did you do? So I think this is also something like if I want to present my design work during the interview, I always think about the challenge instead of the human-centered design process.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
love that approach. Um, how can maybe designers find opportunities to leverage storytelling in the
Mm-hmm.
job sort of interview process? You've talked a bit about the interview process,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe the portfolio presentation, how to tell a story there with your case study. Are there any
Mm-hmm.
other opportunities or moments in the interview process where you feel storytelling can really play a role?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think definitely the first thing just coming out into my mind is your introduction. Because I think a lot of designer they don't really think about the question, or they don't really designing their introduction
Yeah.
for like who I am as a designer and as a human, like why I get into the UX design. So especially for the job interview, like especially during the introduction. And it is a great opportunity for us to leverage storytelling to make a first impressions on the entire like hiring team. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, I will be talking about like uh, what is my like what kind of like work or job I did in my current or past company, and I want to highlight my skill set when I work through my previous experience in this different company
Right.
I had. And also sometimes you can also think about what kind of challenge, like what is the most challenging moment in your current or your past company, and how did you overcome the challenge and grow yourself as a designer. So I will also slightly mention it when I was doing my introduction. For instance, like
Mm.
when I was working at Wayfair, most of my product manager, they didn't work with designer before, and all of our warehousing tool, they were legacy tool. So I will just mention, just using one sentence to mention, like I work with this product manager and engineer who never worked with designer before. And I also mentioned that, so I so I see the designer not only we are like doing the design work, but also we have the responsibility to educate these cross-functional people to
Mm-hmm.
know about the importance of the design. So I mentioned it briefly in my introduction, and later on in my case study, I also like have this kind of echo moment, like where what I will dive deep into the detail, into the story
Right.
about what I did to help them realize the importance of UX research. So what I did is like
Yeah.
during the research process. So I will just dive deep into the story. So this is the first thing I think about, like storytelling can become much more important for in our introduction when we introduce ourselves. The second is the storytelling is also become much more important if you are doing some like on-site whiteboard design challenge.
Mm.
Yeah, I think because I think during the entire whiteboard design challenge, they are not they are not judging like the final design you have to create like
Yeah.
high fidelity markup. This is not the purpose of whiteboard design
Yeah.
challenge. It's more about uh your thinking process along with your
Mhm.
communication skill, and how you can drive the conversations with the interviewer, and what kind of a question or what kind of assumption you made based on your interaction with the interviewer. And especially I think during this whiteboard design challenge, what made myself stand out from other candidate was that by the end of my whiteboard design challenge, I always have a summarize session where I will basically using my storytelling skill set to
To
talk
go through it.
about like yeah, to go through it, like what problem like we mentioned earlier, user problem and business problem,
Mm.
and what is the common user like behavior. So based on the user problem and behavior, here is the critical step, and based on the step, here is some critical screen I drew. And I will also mention slightly about what didn't what if I have more time or resource to working on this project, what I will do differently. Because if this is a real work environment, you might get more access to like user research or data. So there's some assumption I made through my whiteboard design challenge. I need to get further data to validate whether it's is correct or not. So I think
Mhm.
having this kind of summarization is basically a mini presentation at the end
Yeah, it sounds like it.
help me stand out from like other like candidate as well. And the last thing I think for the storytelling also plays very important roles in the behavior question, because beyond this kind of conflict or disagreement behavior question, they might also ask you some question like why you are interested in this company or this team.
Mhm.
I always talk about like why my skill set, how I can leverage my skill set as a designer to
Yeah.
this company, to this team, as well as I will make my answer more humans by sharing some of my personal experience into the story I share with the hiring manager. Like for example, if this is the company like working on some like pet food product, because I have a cat, so I will always talk about how important as a pet owner, like who care about the quality of the
Right.
pet food. So the delivery, all these things become more important. So I will think about what is my personal like story or personal moments I can bring more like humanized story into my answer, so which will also help me like stand out from other candidate. So it's not just about we need to sell like my product design skills, it's also about like how we can build this kind of human connection when I was answering this behavior question,
Mhm,
especially
mhm.
the question beyond the conflict or disagreement, like how do you handle the conflict and the disagreement.
Right. Yeah, I feel like whenever in the past I've been asked the question of like, why are you interested in this company or why this job? It's
Yeah,
really easy to default to like why the job will be
yeah,
beneficial for you and like what you'll get out of it. But I always try to reverse it. And like you talked about, how can you share stories and how can you talk about the value that you can bring to that company,
yeah,
right? So, what
yeah,
is like some past experiences or some interests or whatever it is that you have or some skills that you
yeah.
can then talk about to, prove why you think you're a good fit for that role or why you're really interested in that company. So, I love the storytelling aspect that you brought in there. Let's talk next a little bit about career growth. I know that that's a
Mhm,
topic that you are really passionate about as well. And I'm curious how storytelling has played a role for you in this as well. So, things like approaching a promotion conversation with your manager, let's say.
mhm, mhm.
Any advice for designers on how to approach that conversation and how storytelling as well might play a role in terms of
Mhm.
how you would approach that conversation?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, that's a great question, especially if you are in a junior design role and you want to promote into mid-level position. I think the promotion, like how you are going to promote, the main decision making process might be coming from your manager and other like the design leadership team. So what does that means here is for the promotion, it's not about like if I want to promote by the end of this summer, I I schedule the meeting with my manager. It's more about like 6 months before or year before, I already initiate this conversation with my manager, and during this kind of conversation, for me, like I will directly talk about like my goal for the next 1 or 2 year. I want to become mid-level designer or senior designer, and because depending on the company, for my past job, we always have a career like the designer like skill set rubric for every of level or for each level. So for example, if there's a list of the skill for the junior designer they need to accomplish, and if you want to promote into the mid-level designer job or mid-level design position, you probably need to already fill out and using this example to fill out the skill set under the mid-level designer
Yeah, for the
bucket.
next
So
level.
yeah, so you have to work with your manager early on in order to like working on different project and collect the example for the next level like rubric. So what I did was I definitely like because my manager, like we already get this kind of career rubrics early on. So I fill out the example under each like junior designer like skill set rubrics as well as mid-level designer rubrics. So if I fill out and I start to talk about it during my one-on-one career promotion one-on-one with my manager, it's easier for us to identify the gap. So what
Yeah.
we need to do next is how my manager and we can find opportunity, we can find a project to fill out the gap. So basically, like after I do something and fill out the gap, I can share the example and fill out that column with my example. So
Right.
during my promotion, like during the next year or 6 months later promotion meeting, my manager, like they can talk about like why Minjun could become a mid-level senior designer using the example or story on this career Ruby. And also writing the story on each skill set for each skill set under the career promotion document is also very important. So basically you're still using the framework about what was the challenge for that project and what I did, what kind of action I took to solve this challenge, and by the
Mm-hmm.
end what kind of results for this project we reach. So the result could also from like the project itself, like how much metric we increase by launching this blah blah feature or project. But also the result could be like how the tool or the design framework I create that was leveraged by maybe like 5 designer on my team or like 5 PM on my team. So it could be the success outcomes could come in from both the team collaboration improvement, communication improvement could be the project like metric or any kind of positive like user feedback you gather from the user. So because you knowing about like it's basically a mini story you need to fill out
Yeah.
for each of the Ruby. So because I knowing that, so I constantly collect these kind of metric and having these kind of documents um, on my end, so I can keep checking off like what I did, what kind of
Mm-hmm.
challenge I have along the way, and how did I solve the challenge. And
Yeah.
especially, I always need to document the results. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a few really good things you touched on there. Like, one is, I think, being on the same page with your manager in terms
Yeah.
of where you're at today and those competencies, that matrix of levels, and
Mm-hmm.
what you need to do to get to the next level. I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
important. And starting that conversation early, like you mentioned, like even a year before you
Yeah.
want to be promoted, so that you have the time to work on that together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other thing you mentioned at the end there, which I think is really valuable, is keeping track of your
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments, of examples of how you are achieving, the competencies and the responsibilities at that next level.
Mm-hmm.
It's always hard when like you don't keep track, and then at the end of the year you have to think back of like, what were all those things I did? So having that like
Yeah.
ongoing sort of list of things you've achieved and accomplished to prove the
Mm-hmm.
next level of competencies, I think is really
Yeah.
valuable.
Yeah. And one more thing I want to highlight for the promotion is like your career is your own responsibility. The
Yeah,
manager is always like there to help you to grow, but by the end you have to like really
totally.
work hard and smart to find and using this opportunity to grow your skill set. And the
Mm,
other thing is always like stand out for yourself. If you think I'm qualified for next level, you need to stand out for yourself and initiate
right.
this kind of conversation. Either way, like depending on the company and your manager, either way, you might just stand in the same level. However, you already like you are really qualified for the next level, but no one say like you can get promoted.
Yeah, exactly. You're in
Yeah.
charge of your own destiny, basically.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit around opportunity areas for growth, because I know that that's something that we often hear in like performance reviews. We get the
Mhm.
feedback of, here are some things we could continue to develop, continue growing in.
Mhm.
And often those are, either a particular hard or soft skill. In
Mhm.
your experience, when you've gotten that feedback, you've identified these opportunity areas for growth, what are your next
Mhm.
steps? Like, how do you address something like that? How do you turn that into an opportunity for growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, first thing is about the mindset. Like whenever we receive the feedback from the manager or from other like colleagues, don't take the feedback personally. I think the feedback is always, when we receive the feedback, they which means they want to help us to grow, to become a
Right.
better designer. So this is the first thing. Don't take it personally. It's all about your career growth, or about or coming from your project. And
Yeah.
so second is, so I think there here I can share the example is definitely early on the feedback I received from my manager at Wayfair was about my presentation skill. So
Mm.
based on this feedback I received, what I did was, first of all, I start to uh, join more, like I start to schedule a weekly design review with my PM to make sure that I can get opportunity to present my design work
Present. Talk about
in
your
a
work.
weekly
Yeah.
in a weekly basics with my PM engineer. So by if you're doing more and more, you will become less stressed during each of the review. And
Right.
the second is, I also shadow a lot of designers design review
Mm-hmm.
within my company, so I can start to looking at like what kind of like framework or structure they have for their review, and how did they handle the feedbacks with coming from like different like cross-functional team, and what kind of language they were using at that moment. So
Yeah.
I also have a like notebook that collects uh some common like business like English like they were using in their daily life, so I can
Yeah.
apply this business like English phrase into my
Mm-hmm.
own review. So this is the first thing, like what I did. And the second is, I also asked my design manager for help. Like I want to because I say something like I feel very nervous and anxious,
Mm.
especially when I speaking to a larger group of audience. So because of this struggle I have, my manager at Wayfair, she was looking for some opportunity that during the warehousing team all hands meeting, I could present my design work
That's
during this
nice.
larger meeting. Yeah,
Yeah.
and before the meeting, I think 2 weeks before that meeting, I already have a drive for something I need to present, and I start to practice that presentation with both my
Mm.
manager as, or someone other designer or content designer from my team, so I can get not just the feedback from my design manager, but also the feedback from the peer designer and content designer. So I think it was a huge help for me to like, keep receiving the feedback and practicing with my team before I present it with the larger group of audience. And the other thing I was doing to address this, to improve this opportunity area, it was like I also start to looking for the opportunity outside my company, where I can maybe share like 5 or 10 minute like career journey with
Yeah.
like the group of like the people like outside my company. So early on, I think my first like external presentation I did was at Lady at UX Boston. So it was
Oh,
before
yes.
pandemic. So they are
Yeah.
hosting the event in one of the company like their studio. So I was prepared for the slides and presenting my design
Mm-hmm.
journey. Even it was 5 minutes, but I did practice a lot before I go into that presentation. And my because my manager, they are truly supportive, so they also like went to that event with me, so they can like cheer me up like
That's
during my
nice. That's nice
presentation.
to have the
Yeah,
support. Yeah.
yeah. So yes, and the last thing to improve my opportunity area, the presentation, the storytelling, is I always like searching these kind of learning resource or videos on
Mm.
YouTube or different
Mm-hmm.
platforms. Especially for the YouTube, there's so many like designer or other than designer, there's so many video talking about the storytelling. And
Yeah.
I also watching a lot of like the video like coming from maybe like Google I/O, Apple like conference or like Figma conference, because there's so
Mm-hmm.
many designer they talk about the presentation, they share about they work through their projects publicly. And I always learn a lot, like the transition sentence, how they design their slide, what kind of structure they using to showcase their presentation. So I think just keep learning like outside my daily job and work, and using these kind of materials and videos on YouTube is also a huge help for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of these kinds of resources, do you have any resources to share maybe with the group on how, where can they go to learn more about storytelling, whether it's YouTube channels or books? Do you have anything in mind to recommend?
Yeah, so I have a list of the book recommendation in terms of storytelling, as well as some of the video on YouTube. Like we can looking at to either to learn more about the storytelling framework, or there's some great example about how other designers present their project, like in this public like platform.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I know you shared a few links with
Yeah,
me. I'm gonna drop them here in the chat. I think these first few are some books that you recommended. I
yeah.
think you recommended three here. Is there one, if you could recommend one, like which one do you think is great for folks to get started with? I know that's always a hard question.
It's hard to say. It's
Yeah.
really hard to pick. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think like maybe like you can looking at like the introduction of the books to decide like which one seems more interesting to you, so you can start
Yeah.
with there. Or if you are not a heavy like book reader, I highly recommend
Uh-huh.
you to just watching this video on YouTube.
Yeah, you shared a couple of videos here actually.
Yeah, and the first one is your video about like Uber Eats story. I think you share
Yeah.
a great framework where like we can leverage into like any other like project. And the second and third thing is about my previous like talks about how I what kind of framework and structure I use for my portfolio presentation. So it's more like detailed like framework walkthrough. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a presentation that you did for Design
Yeah.
Buddies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
specifically talk about the portfolio presentation for job interview. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I watched that video and I thought it was very, very good. Um,
Yeah.
okay, awesome. Yeah,
And
you
I
have a
also
few
share,
more links of
yeah.
conferences, right?
Yeah, so for the few other so links, three links about the video is more about like how other designer or design leader they talk about the project, they talk about
Yeah.
the work they did. Even some of them is not directly related to the job interview, but the storytelling technique or how they structure the story,
Yeah.
and also the design of their slide. I think we should definitely learn from this example as well. Yeah,
Totally. I actually remember watching, because you included here Lindsay Norman's
yeah,
config talk on
yeah,
designing for modern dating. I remember watching that talk live and thinking, this is such a cool story.
yeah,
Like it
yeah,
was so, the way she delivered that story
yeah,
was just so engaging and so
yeah, yeah.
interesting. It was the only talk in the whole conference that I like paid attention to from start to end, the
Yeah,
whole
definitely.
talk. It's
And
a good one.
it was a great one for us to learn, not just for the job interview, but also for our like design review in general. It's just so helpful.
Yeah.
Like the story, the visual, any motion, just
Yeah,
anything like she puts on the slide, like are well designed. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's a great example of how to talk through a project. Perfect. Okay, we do have a couple of questions. I'm going to bring them up now. The first one is from Gasaya, who asked, if you had more time today, what are other soft skills would you say
Hmm.
are the most important in your story as a UX designer?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing I find super important is self awareness, which means
Mm,
like if you have the self awareness, you know about like what is my superpower and strengths and what is my opportunity areas.
yeah,
And because in my journeys, I think if I'm not looking for a job, I just stay in my current company. The thing I need to do is I need to focus more about my opportunity areas, how I can grow my opportunity areas to make myself become a well-rounded designer. So if I want to switch in a job, I have more confidence as a designer because I don't have anything that I'm feel super bad about, but I'm
Right.
good at most of the skill set. And having this kind of self-awareness can also help you know about what is your strength and superpower. I think knowing about your strength and superpower can help you stand out from other candidates during the interview. And
Totally.
also, like, you can also using your strengths to do the works more efficiently at your current job, because you can talk about like what thing you are really great at, what kind of project you are really passionate about, and tell this thing to your manager so you can get the project that you are truly interested in, and you can leverage your strength to do the work. But we also need to working on the opportunity area as well. So I think self-awareness is a very important skill set. And the second soft skill is about I think it's the persistent, like it's more about like everything, like every skill set I mentioned, like
Mhm.
storytelling or other skill set like interaction design, visual design. Every skill set or everything is just take time. Like I feel like through my
Yeah.
journey, one biggest thing is just I always have this goal in my mind, but it's just take so much time and effort.
Yeah.
So just focusing on the goal and leverage the external and internal resource like as much as possible to help you
Mhm.
grow and level up into next level. So I think be persistent is also a huge like is the
Yeah.
skill set is beyond the soft skill. I think for both, I think it would be beneficial for both of your life and career. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like good things take time, right? It's like that
Mhm.
patience and
Yeah.
there's no shortcuts in this
Yeah.
career. I feel you really need to let
Mhm.
things take its time. Okay, we had the second question from Andrew who asks, from your knowledge, if you had to give a junior product designer some advice, what
Mhm.
makes storytelling so important?
Mhm. So could I ask a follow-up question? Do you mean, is this question asked like how is important or what the junior designer they can do to enhance their storytelling?
Yeah, Andrew, if you're still tuned in, maybe you can clarify in the chat which of those two you mean. I'm imagining the question is like, why is this important for junior designers?
Mhm.
But he might clarify in the chat if he's still here.
Mhm. Yeah, so maybe I can start with like why it's very important for junior designer. So definitely the first thing is if you want to land a job and stand out from other candidate, definitely you need to have a great storytelling and presentation skill. Um, and the second thing is, what can a junior? I see the answer from Andrew. Like, what can a junior designer
Right.
do to enhance? Okay, so I think I think it's echo back to what I mentioned earlier. There's a couple things we can do. First of all, I think if you looking at this storytelling framework video or storytelling books, you will have
Hmm.
a basic like idea or overview about like what kind of framework I can use, I can apply. And the second is start applying this framework into your daily job or during your
Yeah.
job interview. And from there, the key here is always adapting this framework into your own framework, because I think everyone have their like preference or their own framework. It's totally fine. So start like leveraging the existing framework you learn and apply it. So you can so like over the time you will have your own framework and your own like tip and trick for doing this kind of portfolio presentation. And the other thing is always looking for the opportunity, always push yourself to go out of your comfortable zone, because I remember like I was so scared to do public presentation or speaking with my PM or
Yeah.
design team early on. But I have to like schedule, like send the invite to my cross functional team, and I went to the room and I present my design work. You have to take action. So after you doing
Mhm.
more design review or portfolio attention or this kind of public speaking, it becomes way more easier for you to present the design and share your story. And the last thing is, um, the last thing I think is always like, if you really, because for me, like if I really want to improve like these areas, I will just always looking for the resource and always talk about. I always ask at looking for advice from the people who are really great at storytelling,
Mm,
because I, especially for my portfolio presentation, I was looking for a lot of feedback from senior designer and design manager from
mm-hmm.
other like company, and their feedback is so valuable to me to enhance my storytelling for my portfolio presentation. So always, if you have something to share, like you can share it with your mentor, with your peer designer, because their opinion, their feedback can help you craft a better story for your portfolio presentation. And the last thing is just like keep going, like just keep doing it, and
Yeah.
keep learning, yeah, from all these results. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good note, is that like you don't have to do all of this alone. I feel like often we
Yeah.
feel like we have to do this by ourselves, but there's so many other designers that also want to get better in the skill and also want to,
Hmm.
reach that next step. Your manager, hopefully you have a good relationship with them and they can be there to support you and have these
Yeah.
conversations. They'd probably love it if you came to them and let them know, hey, this is a skill I want to build. Like, can you help me? How can we build this skill together? So yeah,
Hmm.
you don't have to do everything alone. Minjun, thank you so much for this conversation today and for joining us. Where can people go to find out more about you online?
Yeah, so definitely like LinkedIn is the first place like you can reach
Okay.
out to me and send a message. And I also share my like Twitter links and my portfolio
Yes,
here, but I'm not using Twitter a lot because, yeah, because I'm
because it's
not used
Twitter.
to use Twitter. Yeah, but I do check like LinkedIn like in my daily life. So if
Cool.
you have any question or just want to reach out to me, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much for sharing your wisdom with the group today. We'll be back next month with another live stream. Thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.